It's getting dangerous. It's getting dangerous to live in America. And I mean dangerous. On January the 7th, 1997, Glenda Duell was sentenced in front of her family and friends to surrender to the county sheriff, leaving her husband and 2 young children, and serve a 6-month sentence in prison. She was also fined $68,000 and expected to spend the next 5 years on probation, which provides, ladies and gentlemen, for periodic psychological testing at the whim of the probation department. Now, if that wasn't enough, upon her release, Kent Duell, her husband, was to begin his 6-month sentence, pay another $68,000 in fines, and be placed on 5 years probation as well. Fortunately, this sentence was stayed pending the outcome of the appeal filed by the family. They must have committed murder, or robbed a bank, or child abuse, or something, right? They must be really terrible criminals. Isn't that correct? Well, you better think again, folks. The Duells were accused of violating an environmental law dealing with a leaky septic system. And all of those of you who live in the Round Valley and the White Mountain area who are my neighbors, you better pay attention to this, because I know a few of you are guilty of this same thing. That's right. That's right. You'd better listen very carefully. The Duells were accused of violating an environmental law dealing with a leaky septic system. Kent and Glenda Duell were sentenced in Essex County, New York, by acting State Supreme Court Judge David F. Young, spelled J-U-N-G, on 164 counts, 102 of which were felony charges for intending to pollute the waters of the state of New York. Making some of you nervous? Well, it should. This is insane. As outrageous and unwarranted as these penalties are, it becomes even more absolutely ludicrous when you consider that the charges brought by the district attorney, whose name, by the way, is Ronald Briggs, could have resulted in maximum prison time totaling over 1,200 years and fines exceeding $30 million. All of this for a malfunctioning septic system designed and approved, that's right, you guessed it, folks, by the United States government in the form of HUD. During closing arguments at their trial, Attorney Conlon, the Duells' attorney, was cautioned not to mention constitutional issues. Remember, I've told you many, many times that our justice system does not apply to constitutional issues anymore. The Constitution was thrown out, torn up, ripped apart, shredded, thrown in the trash can, burned, drowned, buried, dead, gone, long time ago. You don't believe it? Well, how could this happen if it's not true? The judge told them, don't mention the Constitution. Don't talk about rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Don't talk about the Constitution, period. Don't bring up don't even mention constitutional issues. After closing arguments, it was Judge Young's responsibility to instruct the jury on the specifics of the law pertaining to the case. There was just one problem. You see, the judge couldn't figure out what aspect of the law the Duells had violated. So he asked the prosecutor for help, but the prosecutor couldn't understand the law either. So anxious for an answer, the judge asked the Duells' attorney for help. But Attorney Conlon refused. Then he added another bizarre twist to the case. The judge let the prosecutor place a call to the Department of the court, and Judge Young then instructed the jury. Can you believe this, ladies and gentlemen? You see, sooner or later, this is going to happen to everybody listening to this broadcast in one form or another. You're going to find yourself in conflict with what these socialists call the law. And you're going to be destroyed in the process, just like the duels were destroyed in this process. In front of the packed courtroom, which, by the way, was being televised, TV cameras in the courtroom, Judge Young outlined the couple's serious criminal behavior by stating that his, quote, decision to put them both in prison was to create a deterrent for their actions, end quote. What the judge failed to mention was that because of the state's action, the Duells lost their property for non-payment of taxes, which was subsequently bought by the town for $1. And their neighbors stood by and watched this and did nothing. Did nothing. You see, if I was their neighbor, I would have bid $2 and I would have given it back to them. In fact, I would have bid whatever it took to bid if I had it, and I would have given it back to them. But no, not most people. Nope, not most people. They stood there, nobody bid, let the town purchase this property for $1. Everything they owned. Judge Young characterized the staggered sentences as humane and caring because it prevented the Duells' 2 young children from being placed in foster homes. And at the conclusion of the sentencing, this judge forced the couple publicly to decide who would go to prison first. Glenda, in tears, literally begged that she go first so her husband could keep his job, their income and health insurance for at least another 6 months. Although sentenced for, quote, intending to pollute the waters of New York, end quote, there was absolutely no proof that raw sewage had spilled out of the system, nor that any sewage had seeped into state waters. The prosecutor's expert witness who testified about the alleged environmental damage admitted he had never even visited the site. He had never even visited the site. You wonder why people in this country are just absolutely pissed off and ready to go to war? And they are. And you sit back and you say, oh, this couldn't happen to me. You better think twice, buddy. Because sooner or later it's going to happen to you. On some other issue, in some other place, at some other time, but it's going to happen to you because that's the nature of socialism and communism and these Nazi, jackbooted thugs. And frankly, my dear Scarlett, I don't give a damn whether you like it or not, it's true. Never visited the site. The whole system had been approved. Designed and approved by a government agency for housing and urban development called HUD. Of course, there are many parts of the trial that are being challenged on appeal. According to their defense attorney, Ben Conlon, the Duells were denied due process when they weren't allowed to see the bill of charges. We're not allowed to see the bill of charges. Can you imagine that in a court in this country? Nor were they allowed the right of discovery to examine the evidence against them. You see, folks, every day we get closer and closer to the old Soviet show trials. That's what they are. Now, I have no doubt that Timothy McVeigh was involved in the destruction of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on April the 19th, 1995. But I also know, because I have every single day's transcript of everything that happened in the court during his pretrial hearings, during his trial, and during his sentencing, and pre-sentence hearings. I have every word that was ever said. And Timothy McVeigh was not allowed to present a defense. Period. Everything that he wanted to present in his defense was not allowed by the judge. I have no qualms with his sentence. But I do have a qualm, ladies and gentlemen, with the fact that people in this country cannot defend themselves in a court of law, and that they are judged guilty without ever having been found guilty in America, the land where you are innocent until proven guilty by a jury of your peers, and where the law mandates that you be allowed to present a defense. That bothers me. That bothers me big time. It should also be noted that this case against the Duells had been dismissed on 2 previous occasions. Maynard Baker, Linda Duell's father, said, and I quote, "At issue here is not whether a septic system malfunctioned, but whether small individual property owners like my son-in-law and daughter should face literally millions of dollars in fines and hundreds of years in jail for an alleged minor environmental infraction, while municipalities and multinational corporations can discharge raw sewage into waters under legal agreements and consent orders and be applauded for being environmentally friendly. This is an outrage. And every American citizen should protest this kind of violation of the rights guaranteed in both the state and U.S. constitutions. It is yet another example of how environmental law is terrorizing ordinary, honest, law-abiding citizens and destroying American families," said David Howard, president of the Land Rights Foundation in Gloversville, New York. It's happening all over the country, ladies and gentlemen. This is not an unusual situation here. But if you're a real American, you should be concerned about all of the land rights issues. You see, in the New World Order, these communist, socialist, puke fakes, Nazi, jackbooted thugs get total control. There will be no ownership of any private property anywhere. All of you have spent all the money that you've spent to have land and property and a house and a home to pass down to your children or grandchildren, or as an investment or whatever the reason you bought it. They're going to take it away from you. They're going to tell you where you can live. And they'll probably let you lease something for like a set number of years. But you can't leave it to your children. It's sickening. It is sickening, ladies and gentlemen. Can't stand it sometimes. You see, what I read to you over the air, what I give you over the air, what I impart to you over the air is just a small, minuscule, almost insignificant part of the overall picture of the tons of documentations and communications and newspaper clippings and federal registers and congressional records and laws and testimony and things that we get here on a daily basis. So much that Connie can never, ever hope to keep up with the filing requirement that's created by all of this. And I go through every bit of it. And so sometimes you wonder why I'm upset or irritable or angry. It's because I see all these things that you don't see. I know what's going on, the things that you may never know are going on. And I couldn't even hope to impart even a reasonable number of these things to you on the air. And it bothers me. It bothers me a lot. And sometimes I just get discouraged, like many of you get discouraged. But I keep plugging on because all I have to do is look at my 2 little daughters to know that, hey, bud, you can't stop now. You just can't do it. You can't back off and let those 2 little girls walk into a future world of enslavement. I can't do it. Can't do it to my children, and I can't do it to yours, and so I won't. For at least I'll keep going, whether it happens or not. Let me put it another way: it won't be my fault. Let me put it that way, because some of you people out there listening are guilty as hell. You never do anything except listen. And that's another pet peeve of mine. is that I just don't understand how you can do it. It's like you look around and you tell your wife you love her, and you tell your children you love them, and you tell your grandchildren you love them, but when it comes down to it, you really don't, because you won't risk yourself or your property or your possessions to make sure that their life is free and that their future is going to be good. And that, to me, that means you don't love them. You're lying to these people. And they're trusting you. They're trusting you. How can you do that? You know, I just don't understand that. I'm sorry, folks, but I don't understand it. I've wrestled with it. I've thought about it. I've prayed over it. And I can't deal with it. I can't understand it. I just cannot see how you can do these things. For those of you who missed the conference, Michelle Marie Moore was there on Tuesday and spoke for about 12 hours on all of the things that you've never heard about Oklahoma City, about the bombing, about the lies that the government has told, about the lies that the press has told, about the lies that some of the witnesses have told, about many of the witnesses who have mysteriously died since then, and the strange manner in which they have died, about where the trail is really leading, as to who really blew up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. And again, I'm going to say this, I believe Timothy McVeigh was involved, but to what extent, I don't know. You see, it appears from the evidence that he was a patsy, along with Terry Nichols, and that there were quite a few other people involved in bringing that building down. And she's now working on Volume 2, which is Oklahoma City Behind the Veil.